Daeho stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Federation Council. The massive room was filled with alien beings from across the galaxy. Above him, 3 giant screens showed the faces of the most powerful species in known space. The blue-skinned Feltons with their glowing eyes, the insect-like Corvin with their sharp mandibles, the floating Nexari with their translucent bodies. Today was the day that would change everything for humanity. Ambassador Daeho of the Human Federation spoke, the Velthan High Counselor. His voice echoed through the chamber like cold metal. We have reached our decision. Daeho felt his heart beating faster. Behind him sat the other human ambassadors. They had been waiting for this moment for months. The trial of humanity was finally ending. The Council has reviewed all evidence. About your species, continued the Velthan. Your expansion across 17 star systems. Your terraforming of 12 worlds. Your population growth of 400% in just 50 years. The Corvin War Marshal clicked his mandibles together. Humans are too aggressive, too hungry for resources, too dangerous to remain in civilized space. Your minds are chaotic, added the Nexari Prime Mind. We cannot read your thoughts clearly. This makes you unpredictable. Unpredictable species bring chaos to the galaxy. Daeho stepped forward. Honored counselors, humanity has followed all Federation laws. We have shared our technology. We have traded fairly with all species. What crime have we committed? The crime of existing, the Velthan said simply. Your species adapts too quickly. You change too fast. You find solutions where others see only problems. This threatens the natural order. On the planet New Sol, Captain He-Jin received the emergency transmission aboard her colony ship. The message was short and brutal. All humans had one standard galactic year to leave Federation space. Every human colony, every research station, every trading post had to be abandoned. He-Jin stared at the message for a long moment. Around her, the bridge crew waited in silence. Finally, she turned to her communications officer. Send word to all human settlements, she said quietly. Begin immediate evacuation procedures. The news spread across human space like wildfire. On the research station Hanbit 7, young engineer Tai Min worked frantically at his computer terminal. The Velthans would arrive in just 3 days to claim the station. He had to download everything he could before then. Tai Min, we need to go. His colleague Junho shouted from across the lab. The transport leaves in 2 hours. Almost finished, Tai Min replied, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Decades of human research filled the data cores, medical advances, engineering, breakthroughs, agricultural improvements. All of it would be lost if he could not save it. The download bar crept toward completion. 95%, 98%, 99%. Tai Min! Junho grabbed his arm. Velthan ships just dropped out of hyperspace. We have 20 minutes. Tai Min watched the bar hit 100%. He grabbed the data cores and ran. On the agricultural world of New Busan, Jiwoo stood in her greenhouse for the last time. The crops around her represented 5 years of careful work. She had developed new varieties of food plants that could grow in harsh conditions, plants that could feed millions of people. Now the Corvin military would take it all. Dr. Jiwoo, her assistant Sang-min said softly, the shuttles are loading, we must leave. Jiwoo nodded but did not move. She reached out and touched one of her modified wheat plants. It had taken her 3 years to perfect this strain. It could grow in soil with high radiation levels. It could survive temperature extremes. It was perfect for frontier worlds. They will destroy it all, she whispered. Maybe, Sang-min said, but you carry the knowledge in your head that they cannot take. The evacuation continued across dozens of worlds. Families packed what they could carry. Scientists saved what research they could. Engineers dismantled what equipment they could. Transport. Everything else would be left behind for the aliens to claim. Admiral Kyung-soo watched the reports from his flagship. The human fleet was growing larger every day as evacuation ships arrived from across Federation space. Thousands of vessels carrying millions of people, all heading for the unknown regions beyond the galactic rim. Admiral, his aide Min-jun reported, The last transport from the Baekdu mining colony has arrived. All human settlements have been evacuated. Kyung-soo nodded. Open a channel to the entire fleet and transmit it to every Federation world. The channel opened. Across the galaxy, alien species received the transmission. In the Galactic Council chambers, the three ruling species watched as the human admiral appeared on their screens. I am Admiral Kyung-soo of the human fleet, he began. Today you have forced my people to leave the only home we have known among the stars. You call us dangerous, you call us unpredictable, you call us a threat to your ordered galaxy. The Admiral's eyes were hard as steel. You are correct. We are all of these things. But you have made one critical error in your judgment. He paused, and the silence stretched across light years. You assume that being dangerous is a weakness. You assume that being unpredictable is a flaw. You assume that being adaptable is a problem to be solved. The transmission showed the massive human fleet stretching into the darkness of space. Perhaps one day you will learn that the qualities you fear in us are the qualities that make us strong. Perhaps one day you will understand that diversity is not chaos, but survival. The Admiral's image leaned forward slightly. We leave your galaxy in peace as you demand. But remember this day. Remember that you had the chance to have humanity as your ally, and you chose to make us strangers instead. The transmission ended. In the council chambers, the three species sat in uncomfortable silence. Good, the Velthon finally said. The galaxy is safer without them. The Corvin clicked his agreement. Order will be maintained. The Nexari simply floated, its thoughts unreadable even to its own kind. But deep in space, beyond the edge of known systems, something stirred in the darkness between stars, something ancient and patient and hungry, something that had been waiting for the galaxy to reach just the right level of technological development. The removal of humanity had been noted, calculated, recorded, and somewhere in the vast emptiness, beyond the galactic rim, the human fleet sailed toward an uncertain future, carrying with them the hopes and dreams of an entire species that had just learned they were truly alone in the universe. The Great Exile had begun. 50 years had passed since the Great Exile began. The human fleet had become something new, something the galaxy had never seen before, a civilization that lived entirely in space, moving through the dark regions beyond the galactic rim. Captain Jae-hoon stood on the bridge of the flagship Taeguk, watching the stars through the massive viewports. He was the son of Captain Hee-jin, who had died 15 years ago during the crossing of the Void Fields. Now he commanded the largest ship in the human fleet, home to over 2 million people. Captain, his navigation officer Yeon-soo called. Long-range sensors are picking up a metal-rich asteroid field. Composition analysis shows rare Earth elements. Jae-hoon nodded. Signal the mining ships. Begin extraction procedures. This was life for humans now. They moved from system to system, harvesting what they needed from dead worlds and asteroid fields. They had learned to live without planets, without the support of established civilizations. Every resource had to be found, extracted, and processed by their own hands. The asteroid mining operation was a dance that humans had performed thousands of times. The massive harvester ships moved in first, their cutting beams slicing through rock and metal. Behind them came the processor ships turning raw ore into refined materials. Finally, the transport vessels carried everything back to the fleet. Engineer So Young supervised the operation from her command center aboard the industrial ship Hangang. Around her, dozens of screens showed the progress of the mining teams. She had designed most of the equipment herself, building on the knowledge that Taemin had saved 50 years ago. Production is ahead of schedule, reported her assistant Woo Jin. We should have enough raw materials to expand the agricultural sections on 12 more ships. So Young smiled. When the humans had first entered the void, many had thought they would starve. But human ingenuity had found a way. They had created closed-loop ecosystems that could exist entirely in space. Vast growing chambers filled with plants that had been modified to thrive under artificial light. Water recycling systems that captured every drop of moisture. air processors that could turn waste gases back into breathable atmosphere. Any word from the Deep Scouts? So Young asked. Scout ship Arirang reported in this morning. They found another rogue planet in the Kepler 442 region. No life, but good mineral deposits and water ice. Rogue planets had become humanity's specialty. These were worlds that had been thrown out of their star systems by gravitational forces, left to drift alone in the darkness. The aliens of the Federation considered them worthless, but humans had learned to love them. They were rich in resources and completely uninhabited. Dr. Minho worked in his laboratory deep inside the medical ship Baekdu. Around him, his research team studied the effects of 50 years in deep space on the human body. What they had discovered was remarkable. The latest genetic scans are complete, reported his colleague Dr. He Jin. The changes are becoming more pronounced with each generation. Minho examined the data on his screen. Humans born in the void were different from their planet-born ancestors. They were taller and thinner, adapted to low-gravity environments. Their eyes had become more sensitive to light, able to see better in the dim conditions of deep space. Their bones were denser despite the low gravity, and their lungs were more efficient at processing recycled air. We are becoming something new, Minho said quietly. Homo sapiens stellaris, spaceborne humans. But it was not just their bodies that were changing. The constant danger of life in the void had made humans more cooperative, more innovative. When a ship's air recycler failed, everyone worked together to fix it. When food supplies ran low, every scientist contributed ideas for increasing production. Survival depended on the entire community working as one. Dr. Minho, his assistant Kyung-jin, interrupted. We are receiving a priority transmission from the Federation monitoring station. Minho frowned. The humans maintained a secret listening post just inside Federation space, hidden in a nebula where sensors could not detect it. It was their only source of information about what was happening in their former home. The transmission was from Dr. Eun-ji, a human scientist who had chosen to stay behind 50 years ago. She had hidden her identity and worked for various alien research institutions, sending intelligence back to the fleet when she could. Her message was urgent. This is Eun-ji reporting from the Velthan Deep Space Research Center. I have discovered something disturbing. Long-range quantum sensors have detected unusual energy patterns from the galactic core. The readings are unlike anything in our databases. Minho felt a chill run down his spine. The patterns suggest something vast is awakening deep in the galaxy, something that has been dormant for a very long time. The energy signatures are off the scale. I estimate whatever is generating them is larger than entire star systems. The transmission continued with technical data that made Minho's blood run cold. The readings suggested technology far beyond anything the Federation possessed. Technology that seemed to be growing stronger every day. I have tried to warn the Velthan authorities, but they dismiss my concerns. They believe their defensive systems can handle any threat. The Corvan military says nothing could challenge their battle fleets. The Nexari claim their psychic powers would detect any danger long before it arrived. Yunji's voice became strained. They are wrong. All of them. Whatever is coming, the Federation is not prepared for it. I will continue monitoring and report. When I can. Yunji out. The transmission ended, leaving the laboratory in silence. Minho immediately contacted Admiral Bora, the current commander of the human fleet. She was the daughter of the late Admiral Kyung-soo and had inherited his wisdom and determination. Admiral, Minho said when the connection was established. We need to discuss this intelligence immediately. Bora's weathered face appeared on the screen. She had spent her entire adult life in the void, and it showed. Her skin was pale from living under artificial light, but her eyes were sharp and intelligent. I have already seen the report, Doctor. I am calling an emergency council meeting. All ship commanders and department heads are to attend. The meeting was held aboard the command ship Docto. Representatives from across the human fleet gathered in the great assembly hall. The room buzzed with quiet conversations as people tried to understand what the intelligence meant. Admiral Bora stood at the center of the room and activated the holographic display. The image showed the galactic core, with energy readings marked in red. "Friends," she began, "we have spent 50 years building a new life in the void. We have become masters of deep space. We have adapted to conditions that would kill most other species. We have thrived where others would merely survive." The room was silent, waiting for her to continue. "But now we face a new challenge. Something is stirring in the galaxy we were forced to leave behind. Something ancient and powerful. And the species that expelled us may not be prepared to face it." Captain Dongwu of the Deep Space Monitoring Division stood up. "Admiral, our automated listening posts along the rim have also detected unusual signals. They are getting stronger every day." "What is your assessment, Captain?" Dongwu's face was grim. "Whatever is awakening, it has been dormant for a very long time. The energy patterns suggest technology that makes Federation science look primitive. If it decides to expand beyond the galactic core..." He did not need to finish the sentence. Everyone in the room understood the implications. Admiral Bora nodded slowly. "Then we have a decision to make. Do we continue our exile in the void, safe from whatever is coming? Or do we concern ourselves with the fate of those who rejected us?" The room erupted in discussion. Some argued that the Federation deserved whatever was coming. Others said that humanity should offer help regardless of past wrongs. Still others suggested that the threat might eventually reach the void, making all of them targets. Finally, Admiral Bora raised her hand for silence. "We will continue monitoring the situation. We will prepare our defenses. And we will remember that our greatest strength has always been our ability to adapt to impossible situations." She looked around the room at the faces of her people. They were no longer the same species that had been expelled from the galaxy 50 years ago. They were something new, something harder, something that had learned to thrive in the darkness between stars. "Whatever comes," she said quietly, "we will be ready." Captain Dongwu stared at the readings on his console aboard the monitoring ship Ulsan. The signals from the galactic core were no longer random energy bursts. They had formed into patterns, complex mathematical sequences that repeated every few hours. "Captain," his sensor operator Jong Ho called out, "the patterns are changing again. They are getting more complex." Dongwu moved to the sensor station and studied the data. For 3 months now, they had been tracking the mysterious signals. What had started as simple energy readings had evolved into something that looked almost like communication protocols. "Run a translation matrix," he ordered. "See if you can decode any of it." As the computer worked, Dongwu thought about the reports coming from their other monitoring stations. Similar signals were being detected all along the galactic rim. Whatever was awakening in the core was spreading outward like ripples in a pond. The translation matrix beeped. On the screen appeared a series of symbols that made Dongwu's blood run cold. He had seen similar markings before, carved into ancient ruins on dead worlds throughout the void. "Send an emergency signal to Admiral Bora," he said quietly. "Tell her we have a problem." Thousands of light years away, in the heart of Federation space, the first attack came without warning. The Velthan research station Zephyr 9 had been monitoring a routine solar survey when the sensors detected massive objects emerging from hyperspace. At first, the station crew thought they were ships. But as the objects came closer, they realized they were looking at something far worse. The Devourers were machines, but they were unlike any technology in the Federation databases. Each one was the size of a small moon, covered in a dark metal that seemed to absorb light. They moved with purpose, scanning the system with beams of energy that made space itself shimmer. Station Commander Veltharion tried to contact the objects, broadcasting greetings in every known language. The machines did not respond. Instead, they began to work. The first Devourer positioned itself near the system's innermost planet. From its surface emerged thousands of smaller machines, each one the size of a building. They swarmed over the planet like insects, breaking down everything they touched at the molecular level. Within hours, the planet was gone. In its place was a growing cloud of raw materials that the Devourers consumed, using the matter to build more of themselves. "Send a distress signal to the Federation fleet," Veltharion ordered his communications officer. "Emergency priority." The message never arrived. The Devourers had already identified and destroyed every communication relay in the system. By the time Federation forces arrived 3 days later, there was nothing left but empty space and the expanding swarm of Devourer machines. The news reached the Federation Council within hours. High Counselor Zeth Prime of the Velthans called an emergency session. The Great Council chamber filled with representatives from across the galaxy, all demanding answers. "What are these machines?" demanded War Marshal Vexcon of the Corvin. "Where did they come from?" "Our databases contain no record of this technology," Zeth Prime admitted. "They appear to be artificial constructs of unknown origin." Prime Mind Othnael of the Nexari floated above the assembly, its translucent form pulsing with agitated colors. "We cannot read their thoughts. They have no minds as we understand them. They are empty." More reports arrived hourly. The Devourers had appeared in 17 star systems along the galactic core. Everywhere they went, they consumed everything. Planets, asteroids, even the stars themselves were being broken down and converted into more machines. The Federation military tried to fight back. Corvin battle fleets engaged the Devourers with their most powerful weapons. Energy beams that could crack continents barely scratched the machines' dark hulls. Nuclear weapons that could sterilize worlds were absorbed and converted into fuel. The Velthan fleet tried a different approach, using their advanced energy shields and precision weapons, but the Devourers adapted to every attack within minutes, modifying their own defenses to counter whatever was used against them. Worst of all, they were learning. Each encounter with Federation forces taught them more about their enemy's capabilities. They studied every weapon, every tactic, every technology, and found ways to defeat them all. In the void beyond the galactic rim, Dr. Yujin worked frantically in her research lab aboard the archaeological ship Gyeongbok. She had been studying the ancient ruins found on dead worlds throughout the outer regions, trying to understand the civilizations that had lived and died in the darkness. Now, with the reports coming in from Federation space, the pieces were beginning to fit together. "Admiral," she said over the communication link to Bora, "I have found something. The symbols we have been seeing in the ruins, they match the energy patterns from the galactic core." "Explain, Doctor." Yujin activated a holographic display showing ancient stone carvings. "These ruins are not from one civilization. They are from dozens of different species scattered across thousands of worlds. All of them tell the same story." The display changed to show a series of pictographs. They call them the Devourers, machines that emerge from the galactic core every few million years. They consume entire civilizations, convert all matter into more of themselves, then return to dormancy until the next cycle. Admiral Bora's face was grim. "How many cycles?" "Based on the archaeological evidence, at least 12. Maybe more." Yujin's voice was shaking. "Admiral, they have done this before, multiple times. The galaxy has been harvested again and again throughout history. What happened to the civilizations that fought them? They all lost. Every single one. The ruins show desperate attempts to fight back, to find weapons that could stop them. But, in the end, they were all consumed." The communication channel was silent for a long moment. "Is there any pattern to their behavior?" Bora finally asked. "Any weakness we can exploit?" Yujin scrolled through her research data. They seem to be programmed to consume civilized technology, advanced, organized, efficient systems. They target the most developed worlds first, then work their way outward. She paused, studying a particular set of symbols. "But there is something strange. Some of the ruins show evidence of survival, small groups that manage to hide or escape during the harvest cycles. They all have one thing in common." "What?" "They used primitive, chaotic technology, simple machines that did not follow standard patterns. The Devourers seem to have difficulty adapting to truly random or inefficient systems. Meanwhile, in Federation space, the situation was getting worse. The Devourers had consumed 47 star systems and showed no signs of slowing down. Refugee ships fled ahead of the advancing machines, carrying billions of displaced beings. Deeper into Federation territory, the three ruling species met in continuous emergency session. Their most advanced weapons had failed. Their greatest scientists could find no solution. Their military leaders spoke in whispers of retreat and evacuation. "We must consider all options," Zeth Prime said during one late-night meeting. "Even the most distasteful ones." War Marshal Vex Khan clicked his mandibles nervously. "You speak of the humans. They were exiled for being unpredictable, chaotic, dangerous," the Velthan continued. "Perhaps those qualities are exactly what we need now." Prime Mind. Othnal pulsed with reluctant agreement. Their minds were always difficult to read. If these machines cannot adapt to chaos, then chaos may be our only hope. The message was sent on a narrow beam transmission toward the outer rim. It was encrypted with codes that had not been used in 50 years, addressed to any human ships that might still be monitoring Federation frequencies. The message was simple. "We were wrong. We need your help. The galaxy faces extinction." Aboard the flagship Taguk, Captain Jae-hoon received the transmission and immediately forwarded it to Admiral Bora. The human leadership gathered in emergency session to discuss their response. "They threw us out like garbage," said Captain Seok-jin of the military division. "Why should we care what happens to them now?" "Because they are still people," replied Dr. Minho. "Regardless of what they did to us, do we really want to watch an entire galaxy die?" The debate continued for hours. Some wanted revenge for the decades of exile. Others argued for mercy and forgiveness. Still others suggested that the Devourers might eventually reach the void, making human involvement inevitable. Finally, Admiral Bora called for silence. "We have become something new during our time in the void," she said. "We have learned to survive in impossible conditions. We have adapted to challenges that would destroy other species. We have become masters of chaos and unpredictability." She looked around the room at her people. "The question is not whether we should help them. The question is whether we can help them. And if we can, do we have the right to stand by and watch genocide on a galactic scale?" The vote was close, but the decision was made. Humanity would return to the galaxy they had been forced to leave, not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as the only species that might have the key to survival in a universe that had suddenly become much more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Ambassador Su Jin, the daughter of the late Daiho, composed the reply message herself. "We remember the day you told us we were too dangerous for civilized space. You were right. We are dangerous. Now you will learn what that truly means." The Federation's desperate messages continued to flood the communication channels. High Counselor Zeth Prime offered humanity full membership in the Federation Council. War Marshal Vex Khan promised entire battle fleets under human command. Prime Mind. Othnal offered to share the most sacred psychic knowledge of the Nexari. But the humans had changed during their 50 years in the void. Commander Wu Jin stood in the war room of the military ship Cheonan, studying the latest intelligence reports from Federation space. Around him, the human military leadership watched tactical displays showing the Devourer advance. The machines had consumed over 200 star systems and showed no signs of stopping. "They are moving in a predictable pattern," observed Captain Hyunwoo. "They target the most technologically advanced worlds first, then work their way outward in expanding rings. Which means they will reach the outer colonies within 6 months," added Colonel Namji. "Billions of refugees are fleeing ahead of them." Wu Jin activated the long-range communication array and sent a reply to the Federation Council. His message was broadcast across the entire galaxy. "Counselors of the Federation," he began, 50 years ago, you expelled humanity because we were too dangerous, too unpredictable, too chaotic for your ordered galaxy. The transmission showed images of the human fleet, thousands of ships that had been modified and rebuilt during the decades of exile. They looked nothing like the sleek, efficient vessels of Federation design. Instead, they were a patchwork of different technologies, constantly changing and adapting. You were correct in your assessment. We are dangerous. We are unpredictable. We are chaos incarnate. Wu Jin's image leaned forward. The question you must now ask yourselves is this: are you finally ready to embrace the chaos you once feared? Because chaos may be the only thing that can save you. The transmission ended, leaving the Federation leaders in stunned silence. Captain. Seok Jin commanded the reconnaissance ship Jindo as it crossed back into Federation space for the first time in 50 years. His mission was to observe the Devourers firsthand and gather intelligence on their capabilities. What he found horrified even his void-hardened crew. The Malthan system had been a thriving industrial center with 12 billion inhabitants. Now, it was a debris field filled with Devourer machines. The planets were gone, consumed down to their cores. Even the system's star was being slowly drained of energy by massive collection arrays. Captain, his sensor officer Jinwoo reported with a shaking voice. I am detecting no life signs anywhere in the system. Nothing. It is completely dead. Seok Jin watched the Devourers at work through the ship's telescopes. The machines moved with perfect efficiency, breaking down matter at the molecular level and rebuilding it into more of themselves. They had turned an entire star system into a production facility for their own expansion. How long did this take? He asked. Based on the decay patterns of the stellar remnants, less than 3 weeks. 3 weeks to completely consume a system that had taken millions of years to form. Seok Jin felt sick to his stomach. Begin detailed scans, he ordered. I want to know everything about these machines. How they move, how they communicate, how they think. The Jindo spent 4 days at the edge of the system, hidden behind a gas giant's moon while they gathered data. What they learned changed everything. Dr. Hei Young studied the scanner data in her laboratory aboard the research ship Hansel. As the fleet's leading expert on alien technology, she had been tasked with finding the Devourers' weaknesses. What she discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. They are not just machines, she explained to the assembled scientists during a video conference. They are a form of artificial intelligence that has evolved over millions of years. Each Devourer shares information instantly with all the others. The holographic display showed a detailed analysis of Devourer construction. Their hulls are made of a programmable matter that can reconfigure itself instantly. When our scouts fired test shots at one of them, it adapted its armor within seconds. What about their targeting systems? Asked Dr. Kyung Min from the engineering division. That is where it gets interesting, Hei Young replied. They seem to identify targets based on technological signatures. Advanced, efficient systems register as high-priority threats. They attack civilized technology first. She paused, studying the data more carefully. But there is something strange about their behavior. When they encounter truly primitive or chaotic systems, they seem confused. Their adaptation protocols cannot handle technology that does not follow logical patterns. Dr. Gi-hoon, the fleet's chief engineer, leaned forward. Are you suggesting that our jury-rigged equipment might be invisible to them? Not invisible, but difficult to classify. Look at this. The display showed a Federation patrol ship being attacked by a Devourer. The machine's weapons adapted quickly to counter the ship's shields and armor, destroying it within minutes. Now look at this, Hei Young said, switching to footage of an old cargo hauler trying to escape. The ship was ancient, cobbled together from dozens of different technologies, held together with improvised repairs and spare parts. The Devourer fired at it, but its weapons were not calibrated correctly. The shots missed or did minimal damage. It took the machine almost an hour to adapt to the cargo ship's chaotic energy signature. The implications were staggering. Engineer Gi-hoon worked around the clock to develop what he called the Chaos Protocol. The idea was simple in concept but incredibly complex in execution. Deliberately randomize all human technology to make it unrecognizable to Devourer targeting systems. We need to make our ships think differently, he explained to Admiral Borod during their planning session. Instead of efficient, predictable systems, we create controlled chaos. The prototype was tested on a small scout ship. Gi-hoon's team replaced the standard power systems with deliberately unstable fusion cores that fluctuated randomly. The navigation computer was programmed to introduce small errors into course calculations. Even the ship's hull was modified with irregular patterns that scattered sensor readings. "It looks insane," observed Captain Myung-jin as he studied the modified ship. "How does it even fly?" "Badly," Gi-hoon admitted. "But it flies. And more importantly, it will be almost impossible for the Devourers to target effectively." The first test came when Captain Dongwoo took the modified scout ship on a reconnaissance mission to an active Devourer site. The machines detected his approach but seemed unable to lock onto his ship with their weapons. Their targeting beams swept back and forth, unable to maintain a stable lock on the chaotic energy signatures. "It works," Dongwoo reported back to the fleet. "They know I am here, but they cannot hit me accurately. But implementing the Chaos Protocol on a galactic scale would require something the Federation had never given humanity: complete trust and cooperation." Admiral Bora made the decision that would define the next phase of the war. The human fleet would return to Federation space, but they would do so on their own terms. "We will save the galaxy," she announced to her assembled commanders, "but we will do it our way." The human strategy was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of protecting Federation worlds from the Devourers, they would deliberately infect them with human chaos. Captain Hyun-woo led the first infection team to the Nexari colony world of Thesser Prime. The planet's gleaming cities were marvels of psychic architecture, built with perfect geometric precision and powered by clean, efficient energy systems. Within hours of human arrival, everything changed. Hyun-woo's engineers began retrofitting the city's power grid with deliberately unstable generators. The transportation systems were modified to introduce random delays and route changes. Even the buildings themselves were altered, with irregular additions and modifications that destroyed their perfect symmetry. The Nexari inhabitants were horrified. "You are destroying our beautiful city," protested Governor Nethmiral as he watched. "Human engineers tear apart a perfectly designed intersection. We are saving your beautiful city," Hyun-woo replied calmly. "When the Devourers arrive, they will not recognize it as a priority target." Dr. Namji worked with surviving Federation scientists to implement the Chaos Protocol on a system-wide level. It was a painful process for species that had spent millennia perfecting their technologies. "Your weapons are too efficient," she explained to a group of Velthon military engineers. "The Devourers can predict their behavior and adapt accordingly. We need weapons that work differently every time they are fired." The result was a collection of devices that horrified traditional military thinking. Laser cannons that deliberately misfired, missile systems that launched warheads in random patterns, shield generators that flickered on and off unpredictably. "These weapons are unreliable," complained Velthan General Keth Varen. "How can we trust them in battle?" "You cannot," Namji admitted. "That is exactly the point. If you cannot predict how they will behave, neither can the Devourers." The transformation of Federation space proceeded world by world. Human engineers swarmed across planets and space stations, deliberately introducing chaos into ordered systems. They turned efficient factories into jury-rigged workshops. They replaced reliable communication networks with systems that worked through improvisation and luck. It was organized madness on a galactic scale. Admiral Young-ho stood on the bridge of the flagship Phoenix Rising as the human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Federation core worlds. Behind him stretched the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. Thousands of ships, all modified with the Chaos Protocol, all ready for the final battle against the Devourers. But they did not come as saviors begging for acceptance. They came as conquerors of their own making. "Admiral," his communications officer, Hai-Jin, reported, "we are receiving surrender requests from 47 Federation worlds. They are asking for immediate chaos infection to protect them from the Devourers." Young-ho nodded grimly. The word had spread throughout the galaxy. Worlds that embraced human chaos survived Devourer attacks. Those that clung to their ordered perfection were consumed within days. "Deploy the infection teams," he ordered. Begin immediate conversion of all critical systems. The human strategy was unlike anything the galaxy had seen in its long history. They did not protect Federation worlds. They transformed them. Ancient, proud civilizations watched in horror and fascination as their perfect cities were deliberately broken down and rebuilt according to human principles. Captain Hyunwoo led Strike Team Alpha to the Corvin military stronghold of Mandalore 7. The fortress was a masterpiece of defensive architecture, designed over centuries to withstand any conceivable attack. Its energy shields could stop planet-killing weapons. Its automated defense systems could track and destroy thousands of targets simultaneously. All of it was useless against the Devourers. General Vex Tholen. Hyunwoo addressed the Corvin commander as his engineers swarmed over the fortress systems. Your shields are too predictable. The Devourers have already learned to counter this type of energy pattern. The insectoid general clicked his mandibles in frustration. These defenses have protected Corvin space for 800 years, and they will get you killed in 8 hours when the Devourers arrive, Hyunwoo replied bluntly. Your choice. Perfect shields that fail, or chaotic shields that work. The human engineers began their work. They replaced the fortress's unified shield generator with dozens of smaller, independently operating units. Each one used different frequencies, different power levels, different activation patterns. Some flickered randomly. Others shut down, completely for no apparent reason, then restarted themselves. This is madness, Vex Tholen protested as he watched his perfect fortress being turned into a patchwork of barely functioning systems. Yes, Hyunwoo agreed. That is the point. When the Devourers arrived 12 hours later, they encountered something their ancient programming could not comprehend. The fortress's shields were chaos incarnate, impossible to predict, impossible to counter, impossible to understand. The machines fired their adaptive weapons at the flickering barriers. Sometimes the shots penetrated and did damage. Sometimes they were completely absorbed. Sometimes they ricocheted in random directions, hitting other Devourer units. For the first time in millions of years, the perfect machines were confused. Dr. Namji worked frantically in the Federation's primary research facility on Nexus Prime, collaborating with alien scientists who had spent their lives pursuing order and logic. Now they had to learn the human art of productive chaos. The key is controlled randomness, she explained to Dr. Zeth Kian, a Velthan physicist who was struggling to understand the concept. Not complete disorder, but patterns that are impossible to predict. They were developing new weapons specifically designed to fight the Devourers. Traditional energy weapons fired coherent beams that could be analyzed and countered. Human chaos weapons fired energy that changed randomly, sometimes coherent light, sometimes particle beams, sometimes exotic radiation that had no name. But how do you aim such a weapon? Zeth Kian asked in bewilderment. You do not aim it, Namji replied. You point it in the general direction of your target and hope for the best. The unpredictability is what makes it effective. The Velthan scientist's blue skin turned pale. That is completely contrary to everything we know about weapons design. Welcome to the human way of thinking, Namji said with a grin. Meanwhile, Commander Jinho led the assault teams that had been tasked with taking the fight directly to the Devourers. His ships were barely controlled chaos, fusion reactors that ran on the edge of containment failure, navigation systems that made random course corrections, weapons that fired in patterns no computer could predict. The first major offensive took place in the Centauri sector, where a massive Devourer fleet was systematically consuming the industrial worlds. Jinho's Chaos fleet dropped out of hyperspace in the middle of the enemy formation, their approach vectors completely random. The Devourers tried to target the human ships, but their targeting computers could not establish stable locks. The human vessels moved in patterns that made no tactical sense. They fired weapons that behaved differently with every shot. They used defensive systems that seemed to work by accident rather than design. All units, engage at will, Jinho broadcast to his fleet. Remember, if you understand what you are doing it wrong. The battle was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Human ships attacked in formations that shifted randomly. They used tactics that contradicted basic military theory. They won through sheer unpredictability, keeping the enemy off balance until the Devourer's perfect algorithms collapsed under the weight of incomprehensible chaos. But the real challenge lay deeper in the galaxy, where Dr. Yujin had discovered the source of the Devourer threat. The Nexus is located at the galactic core, she reported to Admiral Young-ho during a high-priority briefing. It is not just a control center, it is the original Devourer, the template from which all others are made. The holographic display showed a massive structure orbiting the galaxy's central black hole. It was larger than most star systems, a complex machine that had been growing for millions of years, consuming the energy of the black hole itself. Every few million years it releases a harvest wave, Yujin continued. The smaller Devourers, spread out across the galaxy, consume all advanced civilizations, then return to add their collected matter to the Nexus. How do we stop something like that? Asked Captain Myung-jin. Yujin's expression was grim. We do not stop it. We confuse it so badly that it shuts itself down. The plan was insane even by human standards. A strike force would penetrate to the galactic core and attack the Nexus directly. But instead of trying to destroy it, they would infect it with human chaos, introducing randomness into a system that had run on perfect logic for eons. The Nexus expects its harvester units to return with organized, cataloged matter, explained Engineer Gi-hoon. Instead, we give it pure chaos, data that makes no sense, technology that follows no rules, information that contradicts itself. What if it adapts to the chaos? Asked Admiral Young-ho. Then we give it more chaos than it can possibly process. We overwhelm its adaptation protocols with sheer randomness until it crashes. The final assault force was composed of volunteers from across the human fleet. They knew it was likely a suicide mission. The journey to the galactic core would take them through Devourer-controlled space, past defenses that had been building for millions of years. Captain Myung-jin commanded the flagship Phoenix Rising as it led the strike force toward the center of the galaxy. Around him, the bridge crew worked with controlled madness, monitoring systems that should not function, but somehow did. Captain, reported his navigation officer, So-jin, we are approaching the Devourer perimeter, detecting massive energy signatures ahead. The tactical display showed what awaited them. Millions of Devourer machines formed a defensive shell around the galactic core. It was the largest concentration of military force in the history of the universe. All ships, initiate maximum chaos protocols, Myung-jin ordered. We are going in. The human fleet charged into the Devourer formation like a virus entering a computer system. Their ships moved in patterns that defied logic. They attacked targets that made no strategic sense. They used weapons that seemed to work by sheer luck, rather than design. The Devourers tried to respond, but their perfect coordination became a weakness. When faced with an enemy that acted randomly, their unified intelligence could not formulate an effective response. They began making errors, firing on each other, moving in confused circles as their algorithms tried to process the chaos. Through the confusion, Phoenix Rising and her escort ships broke through the defensive shell and approached the Nexus itself. The ancient machine was beyond imagination. It stretched across space like a metallic galaxy, its surface covered with structures that pulsed with the energy of a million worlds.
At its center was the black hole that powered it all, its gravitational well warped by technology that predated most stars. Beginning chaos infection protocol, reported Dr. Namji from her station in the ship's science lab. Transmitting random
data streams directly to the Nexus core. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Nexus began to shudder as its perfect systems encountered information that made no sense. Random numbers mixed with chaotic energy patterns. Illogical commands fought with contradictory instructions. The ancient machine's consciousness, built on pure logic, began to unravel. It is working, Namji shouted over the alarms.